Hey guys, Constance here at A Good Life Farm. Welcome back to the Homestead Kitchen. So today I'm going to do a little bit of baking. I mentioned in a video recently that I've kind of been craving some cinnamon raisin bread, and so I thought I would bring you in here today while I make this. Now this recipe uses the classic bread recipe. It's for basic bread. I use this recipe for tons of things. I make homemade hamburger rolls, I make dinner rolls, I make sandwich bread. I have used this recipe for so many things, and cinnamon raisin bread is just another one that I use that classic recipe for. And so I'm going to show you how I do it. Alright, so to start with, let me show you here. I've got 3 cups of bread flour, and to that I'm going to add 2 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, and I'm using an instant yeast here. I'm going to add 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. Then I'm going to need 1/4 cup of honey, and you could actually use sugar or even brown sugar in this if you wanted to, but I'm kind of partial to honey. Okay. Next I need 1 1/2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just using a light olive oil here today. Then I've got 1 egg. And then I have 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of warm water. And because this is cinnamon raisin bread, I like to add a little bit of cinnamon to the dough itself. And so I'm just going to add in about 1/2 teaspoon along with the flour and the other ingredients. So now I'm going to turn on my mixer, and I'm going to let this begin mixing. And I get a lot of questions about my mixer here. I have a video where I talk all about this, and I will put a link to that down below underneath this video in the description if you are interested. So I'm going to let this run for about 10 minutes or so, let this kind of knead the dough and all of that. But I will monitor it and watch the dough as it's getting going to make sure there's enough flour, because sometimes you need a little bit of extra flour. You want to make sure that the dough is pulling away from the bowl and not just smearing all around and like a batter. You want to make sure it's forming a dough. The amount of flour that you need can vary sometimes depending upon the moisture in the flour, the humidity in your air, and all of that. So there's sometimes a little bit of a flux in the amount. Okay, so my bread dough is done kneading. It's been working in the mixer with the dough hook, and so now I'm just going to let it sit here and rise. It's going to take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. It just depends upon how warm your kitchen is or the area where it's sitting. And you're just going to let it go until it's double in size. So I will set a timer for 30 minutes, and then I'll check it and see where we're at. So my dough is done rising. And you can see here it's doubled in size. So I'm just going to take some, actually before I do that, let me go ahead and mix up my filling. So I've got a little bowl here, and I'm going to need a third of a cup of brown sugar and a third of a cup of granulated white sugar. All right. And then to that, we are going to add 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Now I'm just going to take a whisk, and I'm just going to whisk these all together just to mix them really, really well. I want to do it kind of gently because cinnamon kind of makes a dust when it's dry, so as it sticks to the brown sugar a little bit, it kind of settles down a little bit. Now I'm just going to set this aside for now. I'm going to go ahead and put my sugar containers away. Alright, so set that aside. I've also got 1 cup of raisins since this is cinnamon raisin bread. So now I'm going to take a little bit of flour, sprinkle it on my counter here. We're just going to turn this out onto the counter. Alright, flour my hands a little bit, and then I'm just going to kind of shape this into a ball, or kind of an oval here. I'm going to take my dough blade, I'm just going to cut this in half because we've got 2 loaves here. Alright, so then I'm going to take one of them, flour it a little bit. I'm going to grab my rolling pin. So I'm going to roll this out into a rectangle, and I'm going to get this, let me set this over here. I'm going to get this kind of as big as I can get it, because the larger the shape that you can get it into, the more swirl there's going to be in your loaf. Alright, I think that'll work. So now I've got some melted butter. I've got about 2 tablespoons of butter that I've melted here. So I'm just going to take my little pastry brush here, and I'm going to brush some butter all over the top of the dough. Now I'll take half of my cinnamon sugar mixture, and I'm going to sprinkle it all over the top of the butter. All right, that'll do it. And then for the raisins, I'm going to take half of my raisins and just sprinkle them all over the top. And if you've got raisins that are kind of stuck together, try to pull those apart as you go. So now I have my 2 loaf pans here, and I coated these with my baking mixture, which I will put a link to how I make this down below in the video description or in the first comment if you are watching on YouTube. And if you don't have that baking mixture, you can just grease and flour your loaf pans. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to roll this up. I'm going to start at one end and roll it as tightly as I can and all the way up, and then kind of pinch the ends together as I go. All right. Alright, we're going to pinch those edges together. Now I'm going to take my loaf pan here and I'm going to put this seam side down into the pan, and I'm going to tuck the ends underneath as I put it in there. Just like that. All right. And then I'm going to repeat that process with the other half of my dough. So now I'm just going to let my bread loaves sit here for about 45 minutes to an hour, again, until they're doubled in size, and the amount of time you're going to need is just going to vary by the temperature in your kitchen. And I keep them covered with a tea towel so that there's no dust or anything like that that gets on them. And so now we'll just let them rise. Okay, so the bread is done rising. You can see how it's looking there. So now I'm going to take, I've got a little bit of milk here, and I'm just going to brush a little bit over the top to moisten the top of the loaves. And then for the finishing touch, and this is totally optional, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of turbinado sugar, which is just a really coarse sugar. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle a few pinches over the top of it, just to kind of give it a little bit of a finished look. And my oven is done preheating. So now I'm going to put these in at 350 degrees for about 18 to 20 minutes, or until they are golden brown. Okay, so now I'm just going to let these loaves cool down, and then I will slice one open and show you what it looks like. Alright guys, so the cinnamon raisin bread is finished. I actually have another recipe for cinnamon raisin bread as well, although it's not on my website. But I just wanted to show you how when you find a kind of universal classic bread dough, bread recipe, you can take that same recipe and make many different things out of it. So this cinnamon raisin bread is absolutely delicious. Now there is a little bit of a gap right in there where the bread kind of rose and it created an air pocket, and that's why when you are rolling up the dough into that kind of log, you want to get it as tightly as you can, because the tighter you get it, the less gaps you're going to have. But even if there's air pockets in there, it is still delicious bread. So if you would like to give this recipe a try, I do have it on my website, and I will put a link to that down below. There's a printable version that's totally free and all that good stuff. So thanks for hanging out with me here again in the homestead kitchen. My name is Constance at A Good Life Farm, and I will talk to y'all next time.